Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Star Wars discussion. We're still doing it somehow against all odds, like the Rebellion themselves. And this week we are talking about The Empire Strikes Back. I am Brian. That is Angela. My
Hi,
phone is
everyone.
ringing with a spam number next to me, so let's get that out of the way.
That's
Um,
favors.
I know. Um, so we are still weekly here, amazingly.
Yeah.
That might change. We are changing the schedule a little bit, which we'll talk about when it happens. Angela is actually going to be in Disney World next
Yes.
for a few days next week, so
Yeah.
we may end up having to push back the Return of the Jedi discussion. So keep an eye on our social media. We will let you know exactly what the schedule is going to be there, but
Yeah. For now, we are planning on still doing next Friday. I'm going to download Return of the Jedi and watch it on the plane. So we're still planning on it, but we
yeah,
will let you know if anything changes.
yeah. So,
Oh,
so Empire Strikes Back. This is one I know. One of the things we will probably talk about later. This is one that a lot of people. This is their favorite one, or the one they think is the best one,
hmm.
at least. Um, it came out May 17th, 1980, so 3 years after the first Star Wars.
Yep.
The timeline in the story actually is the same. It takes place 3 years after the events of Star Wars. So one of the first example of them using the real world timeline and the movie timeline together. We'll see more of that in The Force Awakens, actually. Um, so what do you remember about this? Do you remember ever seeing this one for the first time?
I remember, okay, as far as the original trilogy goes, I remember parts of this movie probably the least. And I think it's because, in my opinion, it feels a lot slower than the rest of the trilogy. I
Hmm.
think it gets really exciting maybe during the second half of the film. And so for me, I don't know, I probably like this one the least out of the trilogy. I know a lot of people, it's their favorite, so
Hmm.
don't shun me, but I just think it's a little slow. So I don't remember a lot of it growing up.
Yeah, this might have been the first one that I saw. I don't really remember seeing the first two movies. They've always just kind of been there. I very clearly remember, and I don't know if it was the first time that I saw Empire. I think it might have been a birthday party at any point. I know we had a group of friends at the house,
Yeah.
and we either rented or HBO was showing The Empire Strikes Back, and I don't know which is which. I tried to look up when it debuted on HBO, and it may not have been until like 1982 or 83,
Oh,
um, which honestly might make sense because then I would have been about four ish, which is would explain why I remember it then.
yeah.
Um, and the only part of it I really remember from that day is the battle scene on Hoth, which is still one of my favorite scenes.
Yeah.
Um, but I know I saw it a ton growing up. I really liked this. I still really like this movie. I see what you're saying. The second act is very slow. Like it starts pretty interesting on Hoth, and then
Mhm.
it lags for a while,
Yeah.
and then it picks up again towards the end. Um, but I think it's written really really well. I see Wendy in the chat there says that it is her favorite of the originals. Oh, and they got to see it opening weekend. That must have been crazy
Oh, yeah.
with the reveal at the end and everything. I know that's another thing that I don't remember hearing the first time, and I don't know if it was because I was so young or if it had gotten spoiled from me, which happened a lot. Um,
Well,
so
and
who knows?
I guess I do understand why it would be people's favorites from the perspective that a lot of exciting things happen and there's a lot of unknowns at the end of the film.
Hmm.
And like you said, the script is a lot better. And you have in the notes that George Lucas didn't write the
He
script.
did not. He didn't do. He really did not have that much to do with this movie. It was. he had a story by credit, of course, because it's the same characters that he created and all that. The screenplay is credited to Lawrence Kasdan, who also wrote the screenplay for Solo many, many years later, and Lee Brackett, who is a woman that wrote sci-fi short stories and screenplays for westerns, including Rio Bravo and El Dorado. She actually passed away after turning in the first draft of the script, so which I don't know if that's why she didn't continue with. Oh, obviously she didn't continue with it because of that,
Well,
but I don't know if they had intended for her to continue with it after that or not. It was directed by Irvin Kershner, whose name I know so well from this movie, but I didn't never realize he didn't do much else. He made RoboCop 2, which isn't very good. On Deadly Ground, which is a Steven Seagal movie, so obviously not great. And then Never Say Never Again, which is a knockoff kind of James Bond film. It's a long story that I won't go into, but at one point somebody else, because of a co-writing credit, another person whose name I'm forgetting right now, basically got legal permission to use the likeness of James Bond in a film. So it wasn't actually an official James Bond movie, but it was starring Sean Connery as James Bond. So that was also directed by Irvin Kershner. That is an interesting story. If you actually are interested in stuff like that, look up Never Say Never Again and how it was created. It's weird.
I was kind of looking along with that too. That's what I was reading along with. So he didn't direct the film. Was he kind of behind the scenes, kind of doing that special effects stuff that he was really interested in then?
I think he yeah, I think he had a lot. I'm sure he had quite a bit of input on what was actually going to be happening. Um, but I don't know, and I he may have had a hand in the editing, um,
Yeah.
but I'm
Then
not.
what did he do?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure.
Interesting.
Of course, well, as I was trying to look to see, of course, here's not surprising. It's a Slash Film article from 2007, quoting George Lucas saying that Empire Strikes Back was the worst film of the entire series, which is not particularly surprising. Um, but yeah, it's kind of hard to see. Um, yeah, it's hard to tell. I mean, he was executive producer, so he could have kind of done whatever he wanted. But
Some
I don't know.
creative
It's
things.
everything I found before this, and even just now trying to find out, is a lot of just people saying, "Oh, well, here's what he definitely did," but they don't.
Yeah.
There's no citations or quotes or anything, so I don't know. I don't know what he actually did, but yeah, and I'm sure it probably does burn him a little bit that a lot of people say this is the best one, and it's probably the one he had the least to do
Yeah,
with.
no kidding. Well, let's get into some comments. I know that Wendy said she saw this film opening weekend, which is awesome. Dee said, "Good morning." Um, she's going to see Avengers
I
Endgame. That's
know.
awesome
I'm
today.
not seeing it till
And
tomorrow, so I'm not I have not been on social media much since yesterday. So.
yeah, I have seen the first two Iron Mans, and I think I fell asleep during the first Captain America. So I have a lot of catching up to do before I can see Endgame.
Yeah,
Um,
like I said, if we it would be fun to do a Marvel rewatch, especially maybe after
yeah.
Disney Plus comes out, where they're easily accessible. But hi, Michael. Um, and and
Oh, hi.
I
Oh my
warned you and
God.
everything.
Look what
Um,
he brought me. He brought me coffee. Thank you. Oh, it scared me.
um, but uh, but that would be it would probably take us like a year and a half to go through all the movies at a reasonable pace because
Oh,
by
yeah.
that time there's going to be so many of them.
But hey, like this video if you want us to do a Marvel rewatch.
Yeah, that would be definitely next year at the earliest, I think. Like I said, we'd have to wait till Disney Plus came out so we could get them all easily without having to spend a fortune. Although I do own several of
Yeah.
them. It's really hard. I was actually looking at like some of George Lucas's like credits, but there's so many because he gets story by and character by credits for like everything Star Wars and Indiana Jones related.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to sort through everything. But um,
All right. And then Josh is joining us again. I really like that we get like the the returners back. It's nice to see you guys. And remember, you can always comment with your thoughts and opinions. It's not just Brian and I talking at you and having our own, one-on-one discussion. We want to hear what you have to say. But Brian,
George Lucas does have a screenplay credit for Return of the Jedi. That's what I thought. Okay, before
so
I
he helped.
said it, I wanted to look.
So he
So this
helped
was
write
the
that.
yeah. So this was the one that he had the least to do with. So, um, which is interesting and like I said, not surprising because I know he wasn't crazy about the Force Awakens either because of course he had nothing to do with them now. But interesting. Yeah. So let's get into it. Last week we ran very long talking about Star Wars. So we'll try not to do that quite so much this time. So,
All
all
right,
right, let's start getting into the actual plot here.
do it.
3 years after the destruction of the Death Star, the Rebel Alliance led by Princess Leia has set up a new base on the planet of Hoth. The Imperial fleet led by Darth Vader continues to hunt for the Rebel base by dispatching probe droids across the galaxy. Luke Skywalker is captured by a Wampa while investigating one such probe, but manages to escape from the Wampa's lair with his lightsaber. Before Luke passes out, the spirit of his late mentor, Obi-Wan Kenobi, instructs him to go to Dagobah to train under the Jedi Master Yoda. Han Solo locates Luke and cuts open the Tauntaun he rode there to keep his friend warm. They wait there until being rescued by a search party the following morning.
All right, let's address the elephant in the room. Mark Hamill looks different in
Mm-hmm.
this film.
Which is
And
funny because I don't think I'd ever noticed it quite so much as in this rewatch. I think maybe because I'm watching the Blu-rays now and they're so
right.
clear. I was like, whoa! I'm like, why does he look different? And of course, as soon as I looked it up, you can find the reason.
I had always noticed that he looked a little rougher,
Mm-hmm.
like maybe he had aged. And that is good. And I didn't ever really know why. And
Mm-hmm.
then you had reminded me in the notes that he had been in a car accident.
Yes.
And the more I looked at his nose, and I'm like, they did a really good job. Like whoever fixed
Yeah.
it, that plastic surgeon did a really good job fixing his nose.
Yeah, apparently I had heard I saw something where like they had to take like cartilage from somewhere else, I don't remember where, on his body and like rebuild part of it and everything too. So, yeah,
Yeah.
for 19 I think it happened in 77. Like I think it happened while they were still promoting the first one even.
Oh
Um,
wow.
but yeah, if you look, you can kind of notice his nose. There's a little bit of an upturn uh, in the first movie that kind
It
of
seems
goes
a little
away after
flatter
that. Yeah.
afterwards.
He filled out a little bit more, like not gained weight, but just as you do when you start getting like into your
The age.
20s, where
Yeah.
like your face becomes a little squarer and stuff like that, like that. So that stuff did happen too, I think. But yeah, the big and there's been a rumor for a long time that they added the Wampa scene in to basically scar up his face to cover like any of the damage that he was still carrying from the car accident. That's
Oh,
the producers have said that's not true, but
they just
weren't
had it.
they weren't necessarily sad that it was in there because then they could kind of write some of that stuff in. So
Well, and plus, they've been like fighting for 3 years, so
yeah,
he could have gotten roughed
yeah,
up for any reason, really. But as far as Hoth being their like base, I cannot think
hmm
of a more miserable planet. It's like having a base in Minnesota during winter.
yeah,
It's horrible.
yeah. Well,
I mean,
they shot that in I believe in Norway, and I saw where they had like they were having like terrible snowstorms while they were there, and yeah, no, the oh boy, I will not. I don't. I'm gonna try to pronounce it because it's gonna be fun, but it's the Hardanger Hardangerjokelen Glacier near Finns, Norway, is where they
hey, that
shot.
wasn't too bad.
There's one of those O's with a slash through it in there, so.
Oh yeah, so
Um,
it's harder.
but one of the snowstorms was so bad, and actually I think it was the scene where Luke starts to pass out that they actually shot from inside the lodge they were at, but it was snowing so bad and they thought it would look good, so they sent Mark Hamill out in costume and had him basically crawl around in the snow while they all stood inside the doorway of the lodge with the cameras filming.
They're like, "You're doing great, sweetie."
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
10 more minutes, I
Yeah,
swear.
you're fine. You freeze in like 8 minutes, you get frostbite, you're fine. Yeah, so too bad about Scarif because that would have been a much
I
better
know.
base
I know. I
compared.
can't believe they blew that up. That's
I know. Why they gotta. Um, that
one. Go ahead.
that probe looked really good
Hmm.
for the 80s. that I thought maybe that was like a special edition add-on, but you didn't think it was.
Yeah, I looked through on Wikipedia, which is the Star Wars Wikipedia. Um, they list like every change to every special edition, and they
Hmm.
didn't list that in any of them. So I'm assuming it wasn't, but I agree. It looked really good.
Yeah.
And I always that noise is one of those things that I always just remember from being a kid. That that it does. That it kind of sounds like it's talking, but which it
Yeah.
might be. A lot of the droid noises were just like people's voices that they computerized, which is how they are still doing it actually.
Oh
Um,
wow.
but because I think it was R2 was Ben Burt, the sound editor, just started making noises basically with his mouth, and then like ran them through some filters, and like that's how so that they could get emotion into it instead of just beeps and boops.
Oh,
So
that was a good way to do it. They just computerized it.
mhm. Even BB-8, I know in Force Awakens was played by who was it? It was Ben Schwartz and Bill Hader, maybe. I think both did like passes at BB-8, which is very weird. And I don't. I guess they were just
Super
making noises.
random.
Yeah. Um, but they, yeah. Well, you had mentioned in here about how bossy Han is in this section.
He's so mean in the beginning of the film.
Yeah, I mean, he's yelling at the deck officer, like, "Why don't you find out?" And
I
I'm like,
know.
"It's
He's
not
like
his
mean
fault,
to
dude."
Chewie,
Yeah,
which he's like kind of mean to him anyway,
yeah.
but Chewie
But
could rip off his arms.
my favorite one is the, your tauntaun will freeze before you reach the first marker. Then I'll see you in hell. Like the guy, I don't think he was challenging you. I think he was just saying like, your
I
tauntaun's
know.
gonna freeze, dude.
I know. It's like easy, Rod. Like you're fine. It's
Yeah,
good. But he is also on Hoth. I
yeah. I
mean,
mean, I'd be pretty miserable if I was always on Hoth too. I think.
yeah.
Um, One thing I found really weird that I don't remember really paying that much attention to, but um, Darth Vader apparently finds out everything about about Luke Skywalker's existence, at least off screen, because it says in the opening crawl that basically Vader has become obsessed with finding young Skywalker. So they find out that like it sounds like they kind of find out that he blew up the Death Star.
Hmm.
Now I know later the Emperor mentions it again,
Yeah.
although that might be a special edition, but because they did change a lot of that scene. Uh, but even in the opening crawl, and he mentions finding, I know Skywalker is there at the Hoth base and all that stuff. So it seems really weird that like we don't see Vader find, especially because like he would kind of have to assume it's a relation, right? I don't think Skywalker is a super common name, but maybe.
Right. Well, and I suppose like if you really think about them filming a scene where Vader figures it out, I mean, he's still covered behind a mask. So how much of an emotional reaction is he really going to give? And at the end of the
Yeah.
movie, I mean, he still tries to kill him even though he knows it's his son. So, I
Well,
mean,
yeah.
how would that scene have looked
I don't know.
from
It
the
just
beginning?
seemed. It almost seemed like they should have left that until the Emperor told him or something. That like,
Yeah,
oh,
that was good.
just that. Yeah, I don't know. It
And I,
just seemed weird that he all of a sudden at the beginning, like everybody seemed to know who Luke was, and I mean, it makes sense that the rebels all knew who he is
Mhm.
because he's got to be a hero. But
Well, I have my own thoughts on the Emperor telling Vader anyway, which we'll get to. But as far as Obi-Wan Kenobi telling Luke
oh yeah,
about going to Dagobah, it's like, could we have picked a better time to tell me this? I mean, I kind of get it in one perspective because, like, if Luke
hmm
is freezing to death, he's kind of like, inching closer to death, and maybe it's like bridging that gap between like the forest and,
yeah,
like
maybe.
that afterlife thing. But at the same time, it's like, Ben, do we have to do this now? Can we wait till I warm up a little?
hmm Yeah,
Just
I
my
know it's, and
timing.
I always kind of wondered if he did that so that Luke would kind of think it was a dream and wouldn't be sure. But then later, Obi-Wan's just like, "Hey, what's up, buddy?"
I know.
So I
It's like,
mean,
oh,
just
you could do this anytime, I guess.
yeah. Um, so I see Wendy points out here something we had mentioned talking about Revenge of the Sith. Why didn't they change Luke's last name?
Yeah, they changed
Yeah,
Leia.
it seems. I mean, I guess the idea is that that Vader doesn't know that the kids are born. I mean, he doesn't know they're twins anyway,
Hmm.
but he is told by the Emperor that he killed Padme. So presumably he doesn't know that he has kids. But yeah, if he like looked into it a little bit, not only is his name still Skywalker, he's living on Tatooine in the house that Anakin's mother had lived in before
That
she died.
he's
Like
been to.
with yeah, that he's been to, that he's met the people that raised it. Like if he had looked at all, he'd be like, "What? Another Skywalker? Well, that's weird. Oh, he's on Tatooine.
What a coincidence.
He's living with my stepbrother. That's strange. Okay." Like I feel like he could have put that together real easy.
Oh gosh. But as
Um,
far as ectoplasmics comment, we're going to get into that very shortly.
oh yes. Let's yeah. Quick. Let's see. What else do we have here? Two quick things. I really in the new Star Wars hotel they're building. I really want the option to sleep inside a tauntaun that's been cut open.
Yes.
Just even if it's just like a big stuffed animal with like a hole in the belly that I can
Or
shove
like a
myself
couch
into.
or
Yeah,
something, like a
yeah.
couch you can sit in. Yes.
And then we do kind of see John Ratzenberger in this, famous as Cliff Clavin from Cheers and every Pixar movie. He you don't notice him as much because his voice is dubbed over, I guess, so that he wouldn't sound like John Ratzenberger. But he's the one who tells Leia that the doors must be closed. That that it's getting dark out. The doors must be closed. So
How did you figure that out? Did you recognize his face?
it's no, that's just something I had read, and it's one of those you see a lot of the listicles like these 10 actors got their starts in Star Wars
Ah,
movies, that kind of thing, and
you just
he's one
remember.
of the ones that's mentioned all the time in that. So, all right, so let's move to the next section here.
All right.
Echo Base.
The probe alerts the Imperial fleet to the rebels' location, leading the Empire to launch an attack using AT-AT walkers, or AT-AT walkers, to capture the base, which forces the rebels to retreat. Han and Leia escape with C-3PO and Chewbacca on the Millennium Falcon, or Falcon, but the ship's hyperdrive malfunctions. They hide in the asteroid field where Han and Leia grow closer amid tension and briefly kiss. Vader summons bounty hunters to assist in finding the Falcon. Luke, meanwhile, escapes with R2-D2 and his X-Wing fighter and crash lands on the swampy planet of Dagobah. He meets a diminutive creature who reveals himself to be Yoda, and after conferring with Obi-Wan's spirit, Yoda reluctantly accepts Luke as his student. All
Yeah.
right.
So, yeah, the AT-AT stuff is one of those weird things because in this film, at least, and because I don't think they show up again in the original trilogy, they only call them Imperial Walkers in this film.
Yeah.
So the AT-AT or AT-AT, which is all-terrain armored transport, we only know from the toys. That's what the toy was called. So if you want to be like a real hardcore, film nerd, you could just call them Imperial Walkers, and some people do. I always refer to them, yeah, as AT-ATs, but there's a couple things like that we only know from like other media. And the film, one of the funny ones is the planet Tatooine, which is never said in the first film. I think they do refer to it in one of the others, but yeah, after the first Star Wars, they don't ever actually say that that's Tatooine. So,
Well, then I, I'm having a brain fart. I thought that what is the other AT-AT, the one with two legs?
the
I'm trying
ATST,
ATST. Okay, I was trying to Google it and I could not
yeah,
remember.
it's the all-terrain scout transport, and I have one of those, or had anyway. I think it's still in my parents' attic. And you push the little button on the back, and the legs go. But because of that, it's almost impossible to get to stand up straight because the legs are
Yeah,
always at slightly different
they're always
heights.
moving.
So,
I think we had an AT-AT that like you
uh,
could open up and like put a guy inside. I think we had a bigger
I
one.
always wanted the AT-AT. Almost all of my toys from when I was a kid were from. I had a couple Empire toys and then quite a few Jedi toys, and I had some of the cool ones. I had the Ewok Village, which
Ooh.
was awesome. I had the ATST. I had the Slave One Boba Fett ship that came with a little carbonite Han that you could put in there. I had the Chewbacca figure that had the backpack with all the little pieces of C-3PO in it. That's from Empire.
You had all the
Um,
good stuff.
yeah, there was great toys back in like the early '80s. The newer
They
versions
were
didn't.
made well too.
Yeah, and some of the newer versions are cool. I used to have a like giant Millennium Falcon that I got rid of a few years ago, unfortunately, but because I just kind of stopped being able to find places to put it. But
You stopped playing with it, Brian,
yeah,
finally.
and it was still made well, but they were just so expensive that like it was really for collectors, not
Yeah.
for like kids. But anyway, so all right, let's get into this. This is the scene that Ectoplasmic mentioned about Leia kissing Luke and calls Han a scruffy looking nerf herder, which honestly, like, yeah, the insult is real bad, but Han's reaction to it of who's scruffy looking
Scruffy.
is great. Um, yeah, her kissing Luke is strange, and I actually know what I had for later, but still at this point, Leia and Luke were not brother and sister. And this is coming from what is his name, Gary Kurtz, who was a producer on the film. So um, he said that at this point Luke has a sister, which is why the line "No, there is another" that Yoda says later is in
Mhm.
there, but it wasn't Leia yet. In the original script, she did have a name that it was like Nefit or something like that, but it was
Oh,
crossed off because they wanted to rename her, but they still hadn't. So even as this is all going on, like they still, which you gotta wonder like why they didn't like edit some of that stuff out of the special editions to make it
right.
less weird.
I know. Well, and that's not the only time she kisses him. She
No.
kisses him when she takes care of him after he gets his hand chopped off. Or so. I mean, she does it again. But anyway, now that after you've seen it and you know
Hmm.
how it is, like after episode 3, you're
Yeah.
like, gross, don't do it, don't do it. Oh, 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 and then you're just really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But I mean, by that time, you've seen Luke in a diaper. So I mean, it just
Yep.
make it even extra weirder.
There he is, in the back to tank with his little diaper and his scuba thing, which actually looks kind of nice, like a nice warm like bath tube,
I mean, it's
uh,
kind of cozy in there.
and apparently heals you. So like that's not that bad.
Yeah.
Another actor that you will know from other things is Julian Glover, who is General Veers, the one leading the AT-AT attack on Hoth, and actually CH made a comment that says it's a very Game of Thrones type of thing, which is fun because Julian Glover is on Game of Thrones. He is Grand Maester Pycelle. In there is the picture of him. Bottom left is General Veers. Bottom right is him in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where he is kind of the big bad guy there, and then the top is and he's been in a ton of other things. He was the villain in a Bond movie, For Your Eyes Only. He was in Chamber of Secrets. He was the voice of Aragog, the giant spider. So he's been, one of those British actors that's been in a million things. But Grand Maester Pycelle is the one that always throws me off because he just looks so different because of the big beard and bald head, and you know, age comes for us all, I suppose.
Yeah. So, okay, let's talk about that scene where the rebels have to leave Hoth because they're being invaded. Because that's your
Yes.
favorite scene.
This battle scene is one of my favorite just Star Wars scenes in general. Um, I really really like the Imperial Walkers. They seem ridiculously impractical. Like why they wouldn't just put
How do you even get him down there?
yeah. I mean, presumably I guess
Like a
Star
ship
Destroyers
lands.
kind of try. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure there's a reason they don't show that in the movie.
Yeah, like a ship lands and they walk out is all I can really see. But it's like
Yeah,
they have all these people walking around. I'm like, they could just step on you. It's such an easy
yeah.
kill.
Well,
What are
then
you gonna do down there?
there's that one part after they trip the first one up, and then the speeders come by and blow it up, that as soon as it falls to the ground, all these people just like run out of their foxholes cheering. I'm like, there's like four more. Like, what are you
I know you still
doing?
got work to
Yeah.
do.
But yeah, like just like why wouldn't they just put like giant wheels on it? Like for I mean, I think the idea was that because they just look really awesome, and they do. They're like big metal camels, but
I know. I really like uh, the Millennium Falcon scene where they're just like going through and around the Star
hmm
Destroyers. I just really liked it. I mean, little impractical that none of them have seatbelts on. Like Leia's standing there as they're going like upside down and twisting.
yeah.
I'm like, it doesn't fall at all.
Well,
But
the gravity in Millennium Falcon is always like we like presumably it works very well, and it can shift because when they get into the gunner pods, they're actually on top and on bottom. So they would be whoever's on top would be laying on their back, and whoever's on
yeah,
bottom would be facing straight down. But the gravity still holds them. Like it's very weird trying to wrap your head around it. So I don't try very often, but it apparently works really good.
But I really liked that scene. I thought that was really cool to kind of
It
see it
was,
in
yeah.
action and like see
Yeah.
why it's considered like such a fast ship, even though it's like a hunk of junk and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. Ectoplasmic points out the rebels never thought of landmines, which yeah, you would think would work really good. You take one foot off of one of those AT-ATs and it's done. Like,
Yeah,
I mean,
it just like falls down and then you just get the people inside, I guess.
yeah. So then after they escape from Hoth, um, and Luke just instead of going to the rendezvous point, just goes to Dagobah.
As you
Doesn't
do.
seem like anybody knows he's doing that.
No, never.
He just takes off. Even R2 is like, "Hey, what's going on, dude? You
How
okay?"
can he get away with that? Like he's kind of part of the, the Rebel Alliance, and he just kind of does his own thing whenever he wants
Yeah.
to. Like, can anyone else get away with that? Probably not.
I mean, Han Solo probably could, but I think they're always assuming. I mean, they think Han Solo's leaving at any point anyway.
Yeah, he's always threatening to leave. That's no surprise.
Yeah. So then we get to this. So I guess we'll deal with Dagobah first here. I guess.
Yeah, okay.
So we get to Dagobah. We meet Yoda. This is my favorite Yoda. This is just insane Yoda that is trying to trick Luke and smacking R2 with his cane um, and I loved Yoda even as a child watching these movies, and it makes me very sad that he is so boring in the prequels. He has no like mischief in him at all in that.
Well, I forgot just how goofy he was. Like he's like a drunk 3-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
He's like snooping through his things and like trying his food and just like hitting him. And I started laughing at one point. He was
Yeah,
just so funny.
he
And
is.
I had forgotten that because I hadn't seen Empire in so long.
Yeah,
And I just loved it. I thought it was hilarious.
it is weird. Like he has very very little personality in the prequels. Like he's
He's like the wise one, super
yeah,
serious.
which and he still is in this, but he still like I mean even when he's talking about training Luke and he goes no too old. Too old, and just like yeah, like he's just it's so weird. I mean, it's Frank Oz really does portray him like a Muppet,
Yeah.
which is an interesting choice. I'm sure they would. I doubt George Lucas would have allowed it, which maybe is why he isn't like that at all in the prequels. But I don't know. So, and I see Wendy here asked,
Yeah, I
she
was just
said,
gonna
in
say that.
Solo, they add the droid into the Millennium Falcon. Do we see any
Mhm.
evidence of that in the originals? Sort of. There's one line in this section where, let me find it. C3PO says the Falcon has, quote, the most peculiar dialect when he's talking to it. Which a lot of people, I don't know if they've officially said, people have just assumed that that's kind of where they got the idea to put L3 in there.
Mhm.
So yeah, we can presume that she has a very peculiar dialect because it is L337 in there.
Yeah. Where do you want to go from here? Do you want to talk about Han and Leia's relationship? Do you want to talk about the Emperor? That kind
How are we doing on time? No, we're okay. Yeah,
of okay.
let's talk about Han and Leia. What do you think of their relationship? Because it happens very, very quickly here.
Well, it does and it doesn't because you see it evolve over 3 movies where Anakin and Padme, they only really had one film. So I guess it does evolve quickly as far as the film, but it's a lot more interesting and it's a lot funnier. I like their banter. They're just like the Bickersons. They just like fight
Yeah.
all the time and it's not so serious. Anakin and Padme had the whole star-crossed lovers thing, the
Mm-hmm.
forbidden love, and it was just so dramatic. Where
Mm-hmm.
this gets to be fun
Yeah.
and they just get to argue, which I think is funny. So
Yeah,
I like
I think it. I like it too, but really thinking about it after watching Anakin and Padme and their awkward relationship for better part of 2 movies, seeing this, it's like, oh, this also doesn't really make sense that they would all of a sudden be telling each other that, or I guess Leia telling him that she loves him after they don't seem to get all that far along in the ship, but
yeah.
because both Carrie Fisher and Harrison Ford are so charming and the characters are actually like well written, it doesn't seem as weird. I mean, the part where Han Solo like won't leave go of her hand and everything is a little, it's like right on the border of being
I
a little too
know.
much.
Right.
Um, but but she's not like, he doesn't like kiss her without permission or anything, I
No.
don't think. So that at
Well,
least is okay. But yeah, I think it's just, I think the actors have such good chemistry, and the writing is actually like good and not talking about sand. So it's kind of like, oh, okay, this, I guess, it's one of those, you're like, okay, whatever. I guess I could see why they would be together, where we just never got that with Padme and Anakin.
well, and I do agree that her saying "I love you" came a little bit out of the blue. But I guess when you think about the fact that they've also known each other for 3 years,
Hmm.
and I guess you assume this movie was the first time they kissed in 3 years, but they've kind of evolved in a relationship slowly over
Yeah.
that time. And then
And it
when they're
was,
actually on Cloud City or
yeah.
whatever, he's kind of treating her more like they're in a relationship, like kissing the top of her head and
Yeah.
being more affectionate.
And I think it was situational too. I mean, she didn't
Like,
know if she'd be able to say anything to him ever again.
yeah,
So,
yeah, true.
but yeah, oh, I see T's Baseball Life there commented on my shirt, which is my Trailblazer shirt. I'm not necessarily a Blazers fan. I like the NBA, so I have a lot of these shirts. But I don't know how anybody can't be a Blazers fan at the moment. So, but yeah. So all right, the Emperor then. So
Yeah.
when Vader talks to the Emperor, it really depends what movie you watched. The original
Yeah.
movie it was actually a woman whose name I didn't write down that was in the costume, and it was voiced by someone completely different, and the dialogue was different. This is the picture. The top is what you see now. The bottom is the original, and in the original one they digitally added a chimpanzee's eyes over because they thought the human eyes weren't creepy enough, and it just looks real weird. The original dialogue, they say, the Emperor says, "There's a great disturbance in the Force, and they have a new enemy, Luke Skywalker. He could destroy us." Vader says he is just a boy. Obi-Wan can no longer help him. The Emperor says the son of Skywalker must not become a Jedi. And then Darth Vader suggests that he be turned and that he would be a great asset. So that part's pretty similar. In the newer version, um, there's a whole thing about that he has no doubt the boy is the offspring of Anakin Skywalker, which is the only time we hear the name Anakin, which again wasn't in the original. And he tells Vader to search his feelings. He knows it's true. And then the rest of it is pretty similar. But what
I think
what do you
I
think about that? Do you think that adds anything to specifically mention Anakin here?
well, I think that old Emperor looks really goofy and
It
weird.
does. Yeah, it looks bad.
Like so bad. I really like the special edition or like the revisited version.
Yeah,
The conversation, the updated conversation, like doesn't really make sense because the Emperor's talking to Anakin Skywalker about the son of Anakin Skywalker.
yeah,
Like, well, you mean me? You're talking about me? Like,
yeah,
it's just like it sounds weird. It sounds weird in the conversation. So, that was really my only
yeah. No, I
discrepancy.
agree because saying Anakin Skywalker basically assumes that you have already seen the prequels and you know that you know the name Anakin Skywalker. And if you've seen the
Right.
prequels, you know that's Anakin Skywalker.
Right.
So
So
they
you
should
don't need to
either have
say
changed
that.
it that say like Luke Skywalker is your son,
Yeah.
or just don't add it back in. Like I mean the reason they didn't say that in the first place is because they wanted to reveal later that Luke
Right.
is his son, which makes perfect sense. But yeah, like I don't know. And again, the son of Skywalker they call him, and it's like, again, was Vader just like, hey, that's that's me.
Like is he forgetting? I know, is he like forgetting his humanity at that point? Because that would make sense, but I don't know. It's just like the whole conversation's a little weird.
Hmm.
Um,
All
let's
right.
see. Brian said an empire. Yoda's gone nuts from being alone so long, like Tom Hanks in the soccer ball
That
and
could be
Castaway
it. Yeah.
Wilson. Ectoplasmic said that L3, I assume, has millennial accent. So that's her dialect.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what did Leia and Han mean when they said this is not a committee?
I think it's just Han made a comment to her saying, um, "There's no time to review it with the committee," meaning Leia's acting like an administrate, if there was an administrative committee, like she's kind of acting, and then she takes offense to that, yelling, "I am not a committee." I think it's basically just meaning like, oh, you're trying to wrap this all up in red tape, and I don't have time for that, and it's just a shorthand way of saying that. But yeah, I think taking something to committee is not really something that's said so much anymore. So
Yeah.
I could see how that wouldn't quite make sense. All right, let's move on to the next section
All
before
right.
we get
Good.
too far behind.
Okay.
All right. Here, after evading the Imperial fleet, they did not invade it yet. Han's group travels to the floating cloud city on the gas planet of Bespin, which is run by Han's old friend and our old friend Lando Calrissian. Unfortunately for them, the bounty hunter Boba Fett has tracked the Falcon, and Lando hands the group over to Darth Vader. Vader plans to use the group as bait to lure out Luke, intending to capture him and take him to Emperor Palpatine. Luke experiences a premonition of Han and Leia in pain against the wishes of Yoda and Obi-Wan, abandons his training to rescue them, promising to return and complete his training. So here we finally get the man, the myth, the legend, Billy D. Williams as Lando Calrissian.
So good. And I still want a Lando movie. I want one even more after seeing Billy D. Williams in this.
Yeah, and a minor spoiler alert, I guess, for the Rise of Skywalker episode 9. Billy D. Williams is in it.
Mm-hmm.
So be ready to see I think he's like 82 years old now or something, but still,
No.
yeah. But he's actually, yeah, this is the one. I was looking at the ages because I was like, oh, you know what? Billy D doesn't look that much like all that much older than Donald Glover playing Lando in Solo, and it turns out their ages are actually pretty good. Like the time passed between that movie and this movie actually line up right. So he actually aged, pretty well compared to say like Owen and Beru did.
Did you see it's like a meme where it's Han Solo saying to Lando like you'll get the Millennium Falcon over my dead body, and then the next shot is like from uh the trailer of the latest movie, and it's Lando like piloting the Millennium Falcon.
Yeah,
Do you see that?
yeah.
Really good.
Um, yeah, and
Oh,
CH here says that they'll kill him in this movie, and that's entirely possible, I'm sure.
say that.
Um, but yeah, and let's see here. Where was it? Oh yeah, Joshua and Natalie here say that it's interesting. We don't know how long Luke is training with Yoda, which is a question I have in the notes
Yeah,
here
you said
too.
that.
Um, it does. It seems like he is done very quickly,
Hmm.
but basically is kind of a Jedi after this because he does go, spoiler for the next movie, I guess. He does go back
Yeah.
to Dagobah, but doesn't really learn anything then. So yeah, and that I honestly might make the relationship with Han and Leia a little more if it turns out that like because they couldn't use the hyperdrive at all, that maybe it did take them like a month to get to Bespin or something, and
Yeah.
Luke was actually on Dagobah for like 2 months or something like that. Like that would make a little bit more sense. Um,
But it
but
doesn't seem that long for the film.
no, no, they make it seem like he was there like 2 days.
Yeah.
And that's it. Like he trained for one. He had carried Yoda around. He did some flips. He went into the cave of evil, and then was like, "Peace.
Yeah.
I'm a Jedi now."
Eva said that the Vader comics have a lot of Darth Vader's journey and leaving the past behind him. And at one point, he said Anakin Skywalker is dead. So,
Yeah,
yeah, that might be in Rebels too. She said,
yeah. And
and that might explain why he refers to Anakin in third person.
CH said that he trained longer than Rey did with Luke. Although I'm not sure because that's another. And again, we'll get to the Last Jedi, but that's another one where we just don't know how long she was there. She could have been there for weeks too.
Hmm.
But I don't. Although maybe they say, maybe I'm just forgetting that they say how long. But there's more similarities with this movie and the Last Jedi than I had realized, even film wise. Towards the end, which we haven't gotten to yet, when Luke is on the Millennium Falcon after his whole thing with Vader, and him and Vader are telepathically talking to each other. It's shot
Hmm.
almost exactly like those scenes in
Yeah.
The Last Jedi are.
Is it?
which I wonder is where Ryan Johnson. I mean, I assume that's probably where Ryan Johnson got the inspiration from. So, which
Yeah.
is funny because those scenes do kind of stick out as like odd in The Last Jedi. But then seeing this, I'm like, oh, okay, well,
Well, that's where they
they've
got it from,
yeah, they've
probably.
done it before, and I don't remember people even complaining about it here. It's not done as much here, so that could be some of it. But um, um, so let's see. Anything else in this section before we move on? Oh, in the special editions, Boba Fett's voice is all redubbed by Tamura Morrison,
I noticed that.
who played Django in Attack of the Clones. So
Hmm.
yeah, you will notice that New Zealander accent coming out of Boba Fett, which I mean, fine. He doesn't have that many lines. It doesn't
Yeah,
really
it
bother
didn't
me,
affect
but
the film for me.
um, all right. So should we get to the last
Yeah,
section here because we only got about
we're good.
15 minutes left? So.
Vader
Uh,
freezes Han in carbonite as a test. He survives the process and is given to Boba Fett, who plans to collect the bounty on him from Jabba the Hutt. Lando frees Leia and Chewbacca, but they are too late to stop Fett from departing with Solo. They fight their way back to the Falcon and flee the city. Meanwhile, Luke arrives and engages Vader in a lightsaber duel that leads to Vader severing Luke's right hand. Luke accuses Vader of murdering his father, but Vader reveals that he is Luke's father. Luke drops into the air shaft and is ejected beneath the floating city, where he hangs on an antenna. He reaches out telepathically to Leia, who senses him and persuades Lando and Chewie to turn back. After Luke is brought aboard, they are chased by TIE fighters towards Vader on his Star Destroyer, but R2-D2 reactivates the Falcon's hyperdrive, allowing them to escape. Yes. Okay. So this is a good. I liked this whole part. I thought it was. I've always liked it.
well, yeah. I mean, this is
Yeah.
one of the greatest endings. Yeah.
Yeah. I love how like the Empire just kind of lets Chewie get away with killing a bunch of stormtroopers. They don't shoot him. They're just like, well, he's a Wookiee. I'm just gonna back off. Right before Han gets um,
It's frozen.
frozen in
Yeah.
carbonite, they're just like, whatever. I don't know if they planned on just like killing him afterwards, but like no one does anything. They just let him do it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Again, both of these first two movies, there are so many lines that are quotable. Like, I mean, Yoda, like everything Yoda says, I feel like is
oh yeah.
quotable in this movie. I mean, do or do not, there is no try, and
Hmm.
is just insanely well known. One of the more famous ones, this one, I love you, I know, was ad libbed by Harrison Ford. He was supposed to say I love you too, and did apparently several takes with that or variations and or some, and then he didn't think that was a very Han Solo-ish response, and asked if he could do one, and it was this one that is an absolutely historic uh, ad lib into a movie.
And you will see, I believe you can find those T-shirts at Disney's Hollywood
Hmm.
Studios in one of the Star Wars shops. I can't think of which one, but I believe you can buy
Yeah.
those.
Oh,
There's
I think so. Yeah.
there's so many good Han Solo quotes in this film. Like
Oh,
just pick one. They're all good.
Han Solo is a tour de force for Harrison Ford as Han Solo. His not only does he have great lines, I love his after one of the times the hyperdrive doesn't work. I think it's coming out of the after they escape from the giant worm in the asteroid that we kind of skipped over. But and he just starts going, it's not my fault. This isn't fair. It's not my fault. Like I love that reaction. But also Han seems really smart in this movie. He does the whole trick where he floats away with the trash. That obviously Boba Fett knows that trick, but still, it's a good one. Um, like there's another something else too. I forget that he basically gets Leia out of Hoth safe.
Yep.
It's a really good movie for Han Solo, and then freezing him for the last half hour of the movie and a good portion of the next one was a really weird choice.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it just okay. So they set that up at the beginning of the movie by being like, I have to get out of here. I have to pay a debt to Jabba. Like
Mhm.
they set that up, but it's just like so random that they would. I don't know. And I wonder how many of like the diehard fangirls cried when he was
Oh
frozen in carbonite. They did say that he was breathing,
yeah,
so
oh
they
yeah, we know he's
maybe leave
alive,
you
but
with a
it it
cliffhanger.
just seems weird to take probably the most charismatic character. I mean, it's either him or Leia, and
Yeah,
and just to not well non-Lando category, I suppose,
Yeah,
and just remove him from the movie. Like
right.
it's
It's just like super random,
um,
but they did.
they sure did, yeah. Yeah, and now this movie it doesn't really impact because like the rest of the movie is basically Luke and Vader's anyway.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean the whole fight scene with Luke and Vader is fantastic. I love that Vader just starts throwing everything at him, which makes me always wonder like why Jedi just don't do that more. Like that
I
seems way
know.
easier than lightsaber fighting.
They do it a little more in the prequels. I
Yeah,
feel like Obi-Wan does it a little more. And then we know that Palpatine does it in
yeah.
episode three. But
And Anakin, I think, does it a couple of times, like throwing.
yeah,
Well, they do it a lot with the droids, where they kind of
they
throw them
push
around and
droids.
stuff.
Yeah, they do that.
But
But
why wouldn't you just, instead of getting up like with the lightsaber, just sit in a chair and be like, nah, like, and just start throwing things
I
at
know
everybody?
be
Like,
lazy about it. It's way less work. I feel like it's kind of cheap on Vader's part, though.
well, yeah, of course it is.
I
He's the
think it's
bad guy.
I know, but then again, it's like he's like, I've done this too long, too many years. There you go.
Like, if I was a Jedi, I feel like at my house, I'd just keep piles of cinder blocks like in the front yard in case anybody came after me. And just something to throw it at everybody that came
Get off
by.
my
Yeah.
lawn.
Um,
You would definitely do that.
I would absolutely do that. I would probably end up being a Sith. I'd be too lazy to be a real Jedi.
Yeah,
Um,
probably.
but yeah, of course, the famous. I one of the things I put in the notes is the quote, I suppose.
The quote.
Luke, I am your father is it has to be one of the most misquoted things of all time
Not in it?
because that's not the quote. He just says, "I am your father."
Yeah.
Um, and but you almost never hear that. You hear it as Luke, I am your father, which is
Yeah.
never said, which is one of those things that I always realize when I watch this movie that like, oh yeah, he doesn't like he does call him Luke, but he
Yeah.
doesn't. That's not the line. So
No, it's not. And I think it took me a long time to realize that because I mean, it's like as a kid, I didn't really care. And then I'm
well, yeah,
watching it when I'm older and I'm like, that's not it.
no,
So,
no, it is
yeah.
it is definitely not. Although I was wondering, like, I mean, him being the father, like, that's not even a reveal. Like, we saw that in episode 3. I don't know,
I know, it's
like,
not news. Wendy said back in the 80s, we ached to find out what happens to Han. No, I can totally see that. And I
yeah,
think for us, we always, by the time we were 4 and 5, like we already had access to the trilogy. So we
yeah,
knew what happened. We knew he was
yeah.
going to be fine, but trying to put myself in that mindset, like, yeah, that'd be horrible. And then you have to wait till the next movie not knowing what happened. That's like awful. You don't even have access to a book to read beforehand.
Well, and I
That's
think
awful.
I think that's part of the reason why this movie. I mean, it probably didn't have as big of an impact as the first one, just because the first one was so unlike anything that had come before it.
Yeah.
But I do think that this. I think this lived longer in people's minds in some ways because of that, because of the way it ends. It's a downer at the end. I mean, like Luke gets his hand cut off, finds out Darth Vader's his father. Han's in carbonite. Lando and Leia and Chewie are going to try to go save him. We don't really
Mhm.
know what Luke is going to do. And then you have to wait 3 years to find out the answers to any of that. So yeah, and I mean there were books and things that were coming out with some stuff, but like I don't think any of them were necessarily official. So you
Yeah.
still kind of just had to wait and see what happened, and that yeah, 3 years, no internet, so you're not even you're just talking with friends, trying to find about theories about what's going to happen and all that. Like it sounds like a blast. Actually, I
I'm
love that
super
stuff, but
impatient. I would have
um,
hated that.
now there would be 10 million theories online the next day. So it's why I can't use social media right now until I see Endgame tomorrow because I don't want to know what happens. So, and I definitely miss those days when you just got to talk to everybody about it. But um,
Well, and Eva said another reason to be a Sith is the Sith lightning coming out of the
yeah,
hand.
I know that's such
And
an
Wendy,
advantage.
I know you don't get that. All you can do is like retain it when you're on the good side. Wendy said it bothered me watching this movie this time when Luke is healing and calls out Father like he's yearning for him.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
that rubbed me the wrong way as well. where yeah, his reaction, he hears, Luke and father, like it's like you just met this guy, like come on,
I know. Shouldn't you be like crushed to
yeah,
know the truth about this? Instead, you're just like, you want him around? I don't know. It
yeah,
seemed,
I don't know, like I almost would have felt it almost would have felt more natural to have him go like, you're not my real dad.
I know.
um but
Like
yeah,
yell for
it's
Uncle Owen or something.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, but I agree, Wendy, that it did. I don't know. There's something about it that seems strange. And I mean, I can
Yeah.
understand him, wanting to know his father, but like right away seems a little too much. Especially right after he got his hand. I mean, I guess you could assume he's delirious. He's probably he's probably in pain and stuff like that. Speaking
Yeah.
of pain, I noticed when at one point Chewie bumps C-3PO's head on something, and C-3PO goes, "Ow, that hurts." And why can C-3PO feel pain again?
I I
like
know.
like
Like, why
that.
does he have that pain sense?
I mean, we might mention that again in Jedi, because there is a droid torture sequence in Return of the Jedi, which always makes me wonder, like, why did they program droids to feel pain? Like, that seems like a terrible, terrible choice.
I did have a question. Why did Luke jump down the air shaft? Did he know that it would just lead to a tunnel?
I don't. There seems to be some argument about that. Some people think that yes, he using the Force knew, kind of could see a little bit of what was about to happen and knew that was a way out.
I feel like you
Um,
would blame anything on
I
him using the Force.
that's part of the problem with the Star Wars movies, is literally everything can be explained by the Force.
Yeah.
Um, I personally don't think so. I think he decided he would rather die than be corrupted by Darth Vader, and it just happened that he didn't.
Yeah.
But so like that's my reading of it, is that he just said no, I'll never join you, and then was like,
He's
I'm just
like,
gonna end it, fine, and then was like, oh,
I
oh cool,
yeah.
look, I can hang on. Um,
Oh, if I would have ended up on that antenna, I
mhm.
would have freaked out. Oh my gosh, that's like, oh, had the whole
Yeah,
height thing. I'm not. I mean, I don't like heights, but like that's to a whole other level.
but yeah, what? How do you read that scene? Do you?
Um, I mean, he seems way too calm when he
Mhm.
falls,
Yeah.
So part of me thinks that he must have known that he wasn't falling to his death because of just how kind of his facial expression is. He seems like he kind of knows that things will be okay. So, I don't know, part of me thinks that he knew that it would lead him into a tunnel. I don't think he expected the tunnel to open up though and go into, fall into the antenna. So, I can see it
No,
both.
he didn't seem to expect that part. I read the calmness as just an acceptance of your fate, kind of
Yeah,
like
I
that.
can see that too.
That okay, this is how it's going to be. I have two last notes here, both about Vader reactions.
Hmm.
Um, and there's one right after Luke drops, Vader just kind of looks down and then looks back up, like, huh, didn't see that one coming. But yeah, just no reaction, no like Luke, nothing, no reaching, nothing, just like,
Oh,
hmm.
oh, well, he's gone.
And then after, when they, then I think, oh yeah, it's after that when they're then fleeing with Luke, and Vader's Star Destroyer is right behind
Hmm.
the Falcon when they get the hyperspace fixed, and it takes off, and you see the view from kind of behind Vader, the Falcon leaving, and he just turns and turns back to the window, and then just turns and walks away and doesn't say. And all the officers are just looking at him, and he just walks out of the room, and
Yeah.
that cracks me. Like, that's such a good reaction of like, all right, I'm gonna go choke some guys right now.
And he's like, "Ugh, it's been a day."
Yeah, yeah. So, but that's it. I think that's all I really have for this. Do you have any closing comments on Empire Strikes Back?
No, I mean, it was good that I watched it. I hadn't seen it in a while.
Hmm.
Reaffirms that it is not my favorite of the trilogy, but the things that were exciting, I really did
Yeah,
enjoy.
yeah.
So,
I really really like this movie. Think I don't think it's my favorite. I think I still prefer A New Hope to this one. Some of that is just that it's more tied in nostalgia with me, I think.
mhm.
Um, but this is definitely in the up very very close to the top of my
Yeah,
favorite movies, and it's a lot of people's favorite movie. It might be technically the best. Like it's shot really well. The script
Yeah.
is great. The special effects were made some pretty good. They've made some pretty good leaps forward in that. They had a bigger budget, so that helped a lot.
Mhm.
So it might be the best of them. Even though it's not necessarily my favorite, but. Um,
But
yeah,
yeah,
like
we will
Joshua and
be
Natalie,
back.
they say that as a kid they didn't like this one quite as much because of the downer ending, but now it's the
Yeah.
favorite. So, yeah, and I think a lot of people would put this at the top. So we will,
Yeah.
as we when we eventually get to the Last Jedi, pretty soon actually now, we will
Yeah.
go through a full 10 movie ranking, and we would definitely at that point we'll definitely love to read everybody's as well. So
We really have 3 movies left.
that's it.
Wow.
Yep,
Wow, we're
Jedi,
fast.
Force Awakens, and the Last Jedi. So
All right. Well, we will plan on seeing you next week,
yep.
next Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And I hope that you all have a really great weekend.
Bye.
Bye.